Some interesting and unfortunate news has come out recently where the former dean of Temple University's Fox School of Business was convicted of wire fraud. In this case, the dean falsified certain statistics about the school that are then reported out to third-party ranking publications like the US News and World Report. For example, they reported that 100% of their students that entered the online MBA program had submitted GMAT or GRE scores, when in reality, only about 20% had actually taken the exam. Now, it's not uncommon at all for MBA programs to not require GMAT scores or GRE scores, and in many cases, even if there was a requirement, there's oftentimes an exemption process where if a student has enough work experience going into the program or applying for the program, they don't have to take these exams. So it's actually not a big deal that only 20% of them entered the program having taken a graduate level exam, but it is a really big deal that a school had falsified that data. That's because when it comes to business school rankings, those graduate exam scores actually weigh fairly heavily in the calculation of those rankings. And it's not just the scores, but a school can also be penalized if less than 75% of students enter the program having submitted a graduate exam score. Ultimately, what this false data served to do was to boost their rankings, and boost it did. This was actually a pretty well-ranked part-time MBA program, and when it came to the online MBA program that they offered, they were actually ranked #1 from 2015 to 2018. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into determining the ranking of a business school, and those graduate level exam scores are just one of those variables. But short of it is, rankings do have some importance. They could affect the number of applicants and eventually the number of students. It can also affect the amount that alumni donate to the school. They can affect perceived school prestige. But the question coming out of this that you might be asking yourself is, can I trust these rankings? You might also ask yourself, is there fraud happening elsewhere that we don't know about? Or how are rankings even calculated in the first place? Is there an appropriate methodology by which that happens, and does it make sense? And I think the second question is the one to think about, and I'll come back to that here in a moment. My take is this, and it's been my position for quite some time if you look at a lot of my video content. If you're looking into universities or business schools in particular, don't get so hung up on rankings. It's one of many metrics you might want to consider, but by no means is it the only metric. Now, I've got another video that you can check out where I talk a little bit more about what all you should be considering when looking into MBA programs. You can check out a link to that video in the description below. That being said, it is a metric, and obviously in this case there was fraud, but even in all other legitimate cases, you should be aware that rankings is a bit of a game. There are certain rules that a school has to play by to be included, and then there are certain metrics from the school that are considered and assigned a certain weight, which indicates its importance relative to how the ranking is calculated. Case in point, GMAT scores. Should GMAT scores really be all that important for school rankings? I'd argue no, and I'm a little bit biased because I didn't have to take a GMAT going into my program, which I probably wouldn't have done very well on. But I think you'd find a lot of people and even a lot of schools, including the school that I go to, would agree with that statement, because if you have someone coming into an MBA program that has a background with really rich and valuable experience, really how valuable will a GMAT score be in that case to give any kind of indication as to the applicant's readiness for university or graduate level work, or for them to be a good student and then go on to do bigger and better things? Not surprisingly, there are more to candidates than test scores. Now, there's a good amount more detail as it relates to rankings, and I won't cover really any of that here beyond what I mentioned just with the GMAT. I will, however, do a separate video on the topic of how these rankings are calculated, just to give you a little bit more of an idea. So make sure to subscribe if you want to see that content in the future. But knowing what you know about the GMAT score and knowing that there are other variables that third-party ranking publications consider when ranking schools, you might imagine an instance where schools, either knowing or believing that rankings are very important, would operate in such a way that it would yield the best possible outcomes for those rankings. And by no means does it have to be fraudulent, but what I'm getting at is schools will put attention and resources to improve the metrics that are important for rankings, even if those activities don't really improve or accurately reflect the true quality of the education or of the program experience. Which again begs the question, can you trust rankings? Do they matter? Are they a good reflection of the true value of a program? Now, you already got a little bit of my perspective on how important I think rankings should factor into your decision making. But if you want to know more, make sure to subscribe. Check out some of the other content that I have that's related to this video and this topic. And of course, stay tuned for more videos on this topic. And in the meantime, let me know what you think about this whole case and what you think this maybe means for rankings and how students or prospective students should look at rankings as a means by which they decide on the schools that they go to. So leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around.